Today we will talk about use of new media devices for shooting purposes. Now you have already learned about ethnographic research and how and why you should use audiovisual recording techniques for your research. So I'm not elaborating much further on that. However, in today's lecture, I'm going to particularly talk about why and how you should use your cell phones for your recording purposes, which you will eventually use in your research. So the first, we should focus on is why cell phones. The simple answer to it is it's convenient, particularly when you are taking the fly on the wall approach. What do I mean by fly on the wall approach? It's an approach where you simply let the camera record what is going on around you without being intrusive. So if you don't want to be intrusive, then automatically your cell phone, because it is small, it is lightweight, it is convenient. Right. Also, the people whom you are interviewing, or if you're going for a participation observation research, so you are kind of observing the environment around you, right? So, and if you're going around with a big camera or a big audio recorder, then obviously people get conscious, and that is something which is definitely should be avoided in a participation observation research or the research you are pursuing. That's why I would prefer calling it that if you wish to take a fly on the wall approach, then this is more convenient. Also, the fact that particularly this is true for interviews. So you obviously will take a lot of interviews while you are working on your research, and in the interview scenario, when you use a smaller device such as your cell phone, then it becomes more intimate. Intimate in the sense people are more free to open up when you're using a smaller device, rather than if you're working around with big equipments, then people tend to be more conscious, and therefore it's a possibility that people will not open up as such. And other pro particularly is obviously that it is much more cost friendly. Also, the amount, the kind of shooting which you do in your cell phone is of course easy to manage and handle compared to when you're using your bigger cameras and so on and so forth. If you ask me what are the cons of using a cell phone, now a general understanding is that if you're shooting with your cell phone, then the footage used is not of a very good quality, right? However, this is a misnomer in today's date, because many cell phones, most cell phones actually, obviously you have to go through the manual and so on, or the features which your cell phone provides, but most cell phones actually give you very high quality recording. So there are cell phones which can shoot 4K video, right? Or there are cell phones which definitely shoot 1080p video. So this is an iPhone 12 mini. I do document a lot of my personal events and so on. So it's a lot of documenting actually happens using this small device which is there in my palm, right? So that's number one misnomer, and obviously it records 1080p video. It records 4K video, and it is very convenient to use, and it gives absolutely high quality video footage, right? So that's the number one so-called con which comes up in mind when we are using a cell phone, right? So the other aspects are obviously, I mean, if you cannot compare a cell phone to DSLR. One of the best advantage of a DSLR is the interchangeable lenses, right? So, but cell phone does offer you that option. So there are various clip-on lenses and so on, which you can attach to your existing lens, which is there in your camera. These are called clip-on lenses, but nonetheless, obviously, it cannot be compared to what kind of the myriad kind of angle of view which kind of a DSLR will provide. So that's number two cons. Also in terms of depth of field, in terms of the aperture settings and so on, cell phone has its limitation. But if you ask me personally, students, then I I would say that yes, a cell phone has its own limitation, and I'm not denying that. Yet the simple fact that it is smaller in size and it's convenient to use and it's cost friendly. If your entire purpose is to document, and obviously since you're doing research, that's ideally the idea of using the audiovisual medium, right? You're going to document. If the entire idea is to document, or the entire idea is to maybe just publish it in YouTube or or a website and so on and so forth, what you record with your cell phone is more than sufficient. We will now talk about some of the simple camera settings. The first thing which you remember, that your cell phone has its limitation. So do not expect to shoot a Hollywood film with your cell phone. Number 2, resolution, right? Something which you will have to think about. What is resolution? In simple words, resolution is the number of pixels in your image. So a simple understanding is, higher the resolution, the better your product will be. So now the question is, what kind of resolution do you work with? So a cell phone usually, obviously it offers you a myriad number of resolutions, but the two very common ones are 720p. P means what? Pixel. And there is 1080p, right? So obviously 1080p will be better than a 720p. So you can say that obviously ma'am, it's better to use a 1080p. It's higher quality than 720p. But remember that when you are shooting with 1080p, it's an enormous amount of data which you are also gathering. Now as I said, cell phone has its limitation, which means that you will have to see how much of data, how much of footage can you actually record in your cell phone when you are shooting in a 1080p, right? So that is something you will have to be careful, or at at very short intervals you will have to quickly transfer your data to a hard drive, right? Or store it somewhere online, a Google Drive. So that's number 1. Number 2, in terms of setting, you will see that there are 2 options, 30 FPS and 60 FPS. What is FPS? It is frames per second. Just understand it in a way that whatever video you are looking at, so for example, right now you are looking at me, ideally the camera, any camera, is actually shooting a set number of still images. Okay, so a set number of still images is being replayed very fast, and therefore it is appearing to you as if it's a video. Ideally, it's or in reality, actually your camera is simply shooting a set number of still frames. Okay, got it. So that's what it's happening. Now, so it can record, or we have to tell the camera that whether it should record 30 individual frames in 1 second or 60 individual frames in 1 second. Now again, if it's recording 60 individual frames in 1 second, then again it's going to be an enormous amount of data, right? It's again the same problem what happens with 1080p. Okay, so ideally you should record in 1080p and you should record in 60 fps, but you have to understand that with cell phone it has its limitation. So you will be only able to record a very small amount of footage if you are working with such high resolution and frames per second. Next, avoid jerky movements, right? You won't like a footage which has, which is all kind of everywhere in terms of here. So jerky movements have to be avoided. Now for that, what do I need to do? First, I always tell my students that hold your camera in a stable manner. Your hands are most important here, right? So you have to learn, and this is true for DSLRs also. You have to learn to hold your camera in a stable manner. Okay, and the second thing is that you can always use something called a tripod, and you simply buy them and you hold the camera using these tripods, and you get a much more stable image than what you what you get when you are shooting with your hands alone, right? If you are wanting something handheld, you can obviously shoot with your hands and not use a tripod. Next is, this is vertical, this is horizontal. So always shoot horizontally, always shoot in the landscape mode. This will bear resemblance to the kind of aspect ratio which a TV, or a YouTube video and so on and so forth will give you. Next is, many students often ask me that, ma'am, how do I get a cinematic shot? Now, exactly first the question is, what do you mean by cinematic shot, right? Think about it. So then the students come up with answers like, it should look very glossy and it should look very fancy. And they complain that often when they shoot with a cell phone, the image is not very glossy enough, or the image, they want the background to be out of focus and the foreground to be focused and so on and so forth, right? So first is, what do you mean by cinematic shot? Now, my idea, I think, from what I decipher from their words, is that what you mean by cinematic shot is you want to have greater control over exposure, because you need to have correct exposure. A very good cinematic shot, right, will have the absolute correct exposure. You need to have a correct depth of field, and depth of field is directly related to your aperture, right, to your aperture setting. So what is the kind of setting, what is the kind of aperture range which your camera will offer, which your cell phone will offer? That is something will depend on how, quote unquote, cinematic shot you can get, right? Next is white balance, very important, right? So whether your camera gives you this option of white balance, because without white balance, obviously you will not be able to appropriately record the exact colors as they appear in front of your eyes, right? So a brown will only appear brown and not some shade of brown if you do a proper white balance. Lastly, the focus, right? You need to exactly have to focus correctly. Now, this brings us to the question, which again, so how much of all this is there in your cell phone? Number one, check the manual. Check the make of your camera, of your cell phone. Check the features of the camera which your cell phone is providing. So, for example, in this camera, I have two lenses. I have slightly a wider lens and a normal, a kind of less wide, a normal lens. So, this is the feature which this particular cell phone offers. Otherwise, I had to buy separate clip-on lenses. Okay, so you will have to look into that. Apart from that, there are also certain applications which are available, which you can download and use. Some of them are free of cost, some of them are paid, which kind of help you, in the sense they kind of gives you a lot of these options with regard to changing the footage, in the sense that aperture settings, depth of field, white balance and so on. And I want you to, I will take you through one such particular app which is called Filmic Pro. This one is a paid app. Let's kind of quickly look into the into Filmic Pro, the website of Filmic Pro. So, as you can see now, this is the website of one of those applications. It is a paid application. But what it does is that it gives you full manual control, right, and it has a smooth workflow. It works with 4K video. Now, not all apps actually work with very high end. Forget about 4K. There are many apps which won't work with even 1080p video, right? So, you will have to check the app also which you are using for recording, if at all. So, there are each cell phone comes with the inbuilt option also. So, there is an inbuilt camera app. However, if you want more flexibility, then you will have to kind of go into one of these paid apps. Now, why I kind of brought you to Filmic Pro particular website is that if you go into here and you go into the training section of the website, actually this has a lot of resources with regard to using cell phone for shooting. As you can see here that it kind of gives you, yes, now it's in place. As you can see here, it kind of gives you several training videos which you can use as resource Now going back to the lecture, the next very important thing is audio, right? We often do not take into consideration the audio. We think that only recording the document is enough, but since we are talking about research, you know that it's not just the video, the audio has to be also of a very good quality, particularly again if you're not just using it for yourself, but you're going to present your research somewhere, or you're using it as a part of your PhD dissertation and so on and so forth. So you will have to take care of the audio part of it. So a simple thing to do would be to use the the microphone which is there in your camera itself. But remember, simple things which you remember when you use this microphone, do not place it very close to your mouth, right, while speaking. If you do that, the audio will not be very clear. Secondly, please record in a quiet room. In the sense, you will have to ensure that there is not too much noise in the room you are recording. If you are shooting in outdoor situations, then I understand that it's a real problem, because most of these microphones which are there inbuilt in your cameras, in your cell phones, are omnidirectional microphone. Omnidirectional means that automatically it will catch audio from all the way around, like everywhere, right? Which then obviously the audio quality will become of a very poor quality. So this only works actually if you are shooting in a quiet place. Other than that, I will advise that for a little bit of documentation for your research and so on, you can also additionally buy microphones from market which can be attached to your cell phone. So for example, here this is a lapel mic. Okay, this is a professional quality lapel mic, so it has an XLR attached to it, but lapel mics come in all variety in the market, and each cell phone, for each cell phone you might need a different adapter or a connector and so on and so forth. So which when you go to buy, you say that this is a cell phone, this is what my needs are, and accordingly you choose your connector and so on. But it is advisable nonetheless to use a lapel or to use a boom mic or so on and so forth, which can be attached to your with your cell phone. So these are the two options. There is also a wide range of Bluetooth enabled microphones, and these are very convenient to use. Next, just like I mentioned some of the apps for your shooting purpose, in the sense for the for recording, that is for shooting in your, if you want to separately just use your cell phone for recording audio, and then you might want to sync it later with your video. So what do I mean by all of this? It might sound very complicated. So one is you record your audio and video all together in your cell phone. Okay, and the other option is you record, sometimes I do that, sometimes you record audio only in your research, you are not say recording the visual. So therefore you use your cell phone only as an audio recording device. Okay, in that case also there are various recorders. So the one which iPhone comes, the inbuilt audio recorder is fantastic, but if you are not using an iPhone, then otherwise there are recorders like smart voice recorder, like tape a talk voice recorder. Actually there are so many right now, so you just have to choose what works for you, and then you can use it as a separate recorder. Before I conclude the audio part of it, remember that there are connectors, there are jacks which are only suitable for particular cell phone. So before investing in any of these external microphone options, remember that you ensure that you have the right connector and or the jack and so on and so forth. Lighting is for getting good quality video. Again, the cinematographic shot, remember, actually to a large extent the cinematographic shot depends on how well you light your subject. Let's talk about first the use of available light, right? So say suppose you are interviewing somebody and she is sitting in front of the window. So that's how you frame her, right? And you have opened up the window and made it the main source of light. Simply use some reflectors, in fact make some reflectors, buy some shiny paper, glue it onto a cardboard, and just make the reflector and use that reflector to make the fill and your back, right, reflect light and so on and so forth. Now this can be a wonderful thing to do, right? You can use all the home lights. So home lights, I mean, just gather all the table lamps or anything you have at home, and then you can use it. It will actually serve the purpose. Use also lights as props. That can also serve the purpose, and you can actually create fantastic setups, lighting setups. And actually, again, to repeat, it's the lighting which will actually give you that cinematographic effect which you are looking at. Right? So light is very, very important. Okay. So this was for indoor lighting. In the outdoor setup, try and use the golden hour, right? That evening light, nice evening and the early morning light which you get. Try shooting, do not shoot in very kind of 12 o'clock sun, absolutely to be avoided. Try shooting in an overcast day. So that will kind of give you a much better lighting than shooting in direct sunlight. So this was pretty much about lighting. Apart from that, again, camera has its limitation. Cell phone camera has its limitation. Ensure that the kind of aperture setting which your camera offers, or the kind of light. So often with camera, a problem becomes this becomes a huge problem that with working with low light situations, right? Because your cell phone will not give you that option to shoot. It will become dark, it will become noisy. So you will have to ensure that your cell phone camera works in that low light situation. This is a very good write-up I found on smartphone lights, and as you can see here, there are also in the market, there are a lot of portable lights option for your cell phone which you can directly mount on your cell phone. So there is inbuilt flash in your camera, but use that flash very wisely, because a flash is a frontal light which falls on your face. It will not enhance the features and it often doesn't look very good. So use your flash very wisely, but there are a lot of other lights such as these, such as these portable camera lights which can be attached to your camera, right? And they can serve very well, particularly when you're just simply quickly interviewing somebody and you have low light, because camera, as I said, your cell phone camera is not very good at handling low light situation. So these kind of additional mounts will be very, very helpful. Next is I would quickly touch upon how to build a video studio at home. At home means in an indoor situation. Number one, please be very careful while choosing the backdrop. The backdrop should be clutter free, right? You can just use a plain wall, or you can make buy wallpapers and so on and so forth, but ensure that it's not like very cluttered background. I would suggest, if it's for research purpose, use just one color plain background. Okay, that's number one. Number two, please keep in mind the framing. Just don't shoot randomly, right? Keep the frame a little balanced. Just use the simple rule of thirds, right? So the rule of thirds is when you divide the frame into two vertical and two horizontal lines, then you will have to place your subject in one of the intersection. And few things which you have to keep in mind, that your focus remains on your point of interest, your background remains clutter free, and you frame it that it looks nice to your eyes. That's most important, that it kind of looks nice to your eyes. Accordingly, you can choose the frame size. So right now you are looking at me in a mid shot, right? I'll quickly show you a close up. So this is a close up. So this is another option, and remember to alternate if possible. If you have an option of two cell phones, if you're recording with two cell phones, remember to alternate. See if when I'm switching, it looks so much better rather than having just one camera and fixating at this one shot size. So just remember all of this, and apart from that, have a frame which is not shaky. If you just follow all of this, shooting at home, a small interview can be a piece of cake, very easy. The storage is very important. A simple way to store, if it's a small amount of footage, you can store it in Google Drive, right? You know your 15 GB free Google Drive option. You can also buy more space. If you have a hard drive option, you can store it in hard drive. Also, I use a lot of this particular website called WeTransfer, which lets you transfer huge amount of footage from one person to another. Often this is very helpful because you don't work as one person as a research or while making a film. You're using it, you are doing it as a team. So often we need to send large amount of files from one person to another person. So WeTransfer, you can upload files for up to 200 GB and then send them securely and so on and so forth. So it's a fantastic thing to use when you are working with large amount of footage. On that note, I will end my lecture. Thank you and looking forward to seeing all of you again.